As you can see, we are now in the process of building a portfolio rather than just one project, a portfolio of sustainable green battery metals projects. And I think that that is a slight change in terms of where we've been coming from, both in terms of the fact that we've got an additional project, but also the fact that we are really focusing this company on sustainability going forward. And the reasons for that will become very clear as I go through this. We have two projects at this stage: the very advanced and very substantial Oran Cross Graphite project, which is estimated between 2 and 3 billion tons. We have a mining license already awarded in 2019, and we are currently well within the pre-feasibility study stage. And very importantly, and we'll discuss this as well later, we're targeting to get into production next year rather than 2025. We're going to start a pilot plant from next year. And then, as announced this week, we've added the Aquila Congo nickel project, which you can see on that picture, on that slide, is just to the northwest of Kitgum, which is the regional center, not far from Oran Cross at all. And we believe it is a highly prospective nickel sulfide exploration project. Lots of work already done and massive upside potential. And for those of you who understand nickel, it's hugely in demand at the moment and going to be one of the key battery metals going forward. So to have the opportunity to add another battery metals project in together with the one we've already got just represented a great opportunity for us and one that we didn't want to miss out on. So we're going to do some exploring there as well going forward. The team, we've got a very rounded, experienced board representing geology, corporate. We've got excellent mining engineers and a lot of skill set there, which can take us through the various stages that we need to go. In terms of our corporate highlights, I think our market cap's probably a little bit low, to be honest. £8 million for a company that's got what we've got is something we've got to work on going forward. But I think we're starting to really get some momentum at the moment. The last 2 months, we've traded more shares than we've ever traded before. There's been huge eyeballs and huge liquidity, which is excellent. And that's obviously something that we want. But we're going to be continuing to do everything we can to get news flow going forward. Why sustainability? At the end of the day, it's becoming the buzzword. Everybody's heard about ESG, but the sustainability of your project is not only important in terms of how we view our own role within the environmental and the world as such, but it's incredibly important that we are utilizing the advantages that we have at our project in order to appeal to the many funds that are going to be looking to put some of their money into what they consider to be the best renewable projects going forward. And we have considerable advantages that we can utilize in that regard, including, as you can see in that picture, access to hydroelectric power. And so we have now engaged with ERM, who are one of the leading worldwide environmental consultants, to basically work through a plan with us over the next couple of months, which will form part of our pre-feasibility study, where we're going to show our ESG and our environmental credentials and our sustainability credentials. And ultimately, we want to be looking to sell a very green graphite product. And whilst that may not necessarily matter so much to the people buying our product, it's definitely going to matter to the people that we're looking to in order to fund us. Social development's another very important part of this sustainability. We work very hard to build very strong relationships in the community, and we'll continue to do that going forward. As I say, it's not something that we pay lip service to. We've got a lot of work going on there all the time. So let me tell you about the value proposition associated with Oran Cross. It's got an enormous quantity of graphite, which presents at surface. We've drilled that out over the last 2 years to a JORC resource standard that will probably give us somewhere, I'm saying 15 years, my life of mine here, but I suspect we've got more than 20 years by the time the new JORC resource comes out. And that's literally imminent over the next couple of weeks. So we don't need to do further drilling, which obviously means we don't have a big capital requirement coming forward. It's drilled out. And what has it shown us? It's shown us that we've got huge quantities of graphite, which presents from very near the surface as a free dig. We don't have to do any drill and blast. We can literally scoop it up. We can put it through into our processing facility. And ultimately, the work that we've been doing in Canada is proving that we've got one of the highest quality concentrates out of any graphite project in the world. In fact, I'm starting to hear from our sales and marketing consultant that we might actually be so high quality that some of the end users might not be able to take it in because they've got their own limitations about whether they can take anything above 97%. So it's a good problem to have. And we've got an excellent mix of jumbo, large, and the medium and small flake size as well. So we really have got a product and a project that's starting to stand out as being exceptional. The mining license already being awarded takes away one of the biggest risks. And we'll talk a little bit about Uganda. I know some of the questions that have been posed already talk about the Uganda as a country and what are the risks there. We don't believe that it has too many risks. We are very comfortable working there. We've got a great team that's working with us. I'm going to be out there in April and hoping to meet up with the president, but certainly meeting up with a bunch of ministers. And we're going to be working very closely with them in consultation with them all in order to deliver this. It's a very big thing for the country. It hasn't got a huge mining pedigree, and it's very keen to have that. So they are working closely with us, and I think that's very much in our favor. The project's at PFS stage. We did complete a PEA last year, excuse me, which showed very substantial NPV, IRRs, etc. We're slightly tweaking that in the PFS, but I'm still very, very confident we're going to end up with a very good result. Most importantly, it's showing us that we have a low operating cost and we're making very substantial margins, which I think are going to get bigger. And of course, there's a very strong graphite demand that's been forecast, fulfilling lithium-ion battery demand for the EV market. And we're being told by everybody that price spiking is likely to occur. In fact, we're seeing that occurring as we speak. I think the prices for the small fines have gone up by 25% over the last quarter. We're going to focus on getting into production by 2023, and I'll talk about why in a minute. So these are the milestones. As I say, we acquired about 2 years ago. We've done 2 substantial drilling programs. We've done a lot of met test work. We've raised money as necessary. We don't necessarily raise lots and lots of money because we don't want to over dilute. We just raise enough to keep going and do what we've got to do. And then we've acquired the Aquila Congo project in the last couple of days. Going forward, we've got a revised JORC resource coming up, as I said, in the next couple of weeks. We've got further metallurgical test work. It's our final met test work that's been completed over the next month or so. And that will all form part of the PFS that's going to be done by the middle of this calendar year. We're then going to move forward into what we call our DFS stage. And part of that definitive study will be to commission a pilot plant and produce some small quantity of graphite on site. And the reason for that is that we need to pre-qualify our product with end users. We need to not only take what we can produce in a lab and they might have a look at it and say, yes, we like it, but they want to see that we can actually produce it and continue to produce it over a period of time from the mining operation before they will ultimately take much larger quantities from us. So it's a very necessary part of the whole procedure. And I think it's a bit like a dress rehearsal. It gives us the opportunity to get up in a much smaller scale, in a much smaller capital requirement, and go and do it, and then expand that when we go into full production in 2025. As I say, the PEA, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, other than to say that we are looking at a lower or smaller startup, 25,000 tons rather than 75. We will have it in a modular format that we can expand at any stage, and our PFS will be assuming that we will expand going forward to 100,000 tons by year 10. But the most important part of this slide is really the operating costs around $500 per ton, which makes us one of the lowest costs. And that includes the transport of getting it to Mombasa port as well. And the capital expenditure, as we focus on a much smaller operation to start, will be much lower than that 80 million, which again is very valuable for us. Weighted average selling price over $1,000 means we're going to make good margin. The JORC resource to date, 16 million tonnes at 6%. We've been waiting for this new revised JORC resource for a while, and I guess my apologies for not having completed it as quickly as we expected to. There's obviously a lot of delays in terms of freighting things around the world at the moment, with as I'm sure everybody's aware, and it's just a little bit more challenging than it's been before. But we will have it out shortly, and we'll be looking to revise that in a very decent upgrade, both in terms of the tonnes and in terms of the grade. The metallurgy is not going to change that much. It's exceptional. We're not only getting a very high concentrate percentage, but we're also getting a great recovery as well. So no complaints whatsoever there. This is what we're looking to sell as in product. 4 different mesh sizes. We call them jumbo, large, medium, and small, but it's really determined by the mesh sizes. And the reality is we've got certain end mix in terms of what the metallurgy testing has given us. We're going to be approximately 35-36% as the jumbo and large, and the remainder of that's going to be in the medium and small fines. So we'll have different products going into different end users, but the majority of our product, being that 65%, will be going into the battery market. You can see from the pricing, the estimates on the right-hand side there. We're expecting to get much higher prices for the jumbo and large flakes. Those prices are significantly higher already than what I've got on the screen here. So these were taken back in September last year when we did our PEA. We'll be revising these accordingly as we do the PFS. But I would hope that our weighted average is going to be somewhere in the order of $1,100 to $1,300 per ton. Lots of different applications for those who don't really understand the graphite market. Traditionally, a lot of the graphite is sold into steel foundries for lining, for thermal sheets. Flame retardant market is definitely growing, and the expandables market for foils. But the one that's obviously capturing all the attention is lithium-ion batteries and the non-replaceable requirement for graphite within the anode, within the lithium-ion battery. And that's where the big growth is going to happen going forward. So this is the estimate. Some of you may have seen this before. I've obviously had it for a little while, but I think it depicts very nicely what's happening in this space. Around about 15 million EVs today, excuse me, and growing very fast. Somewhere between 100 and 600 forecast by the end of this decade. That's an enormous shift in terms of the quantity of electric vehicles and obviously associated batteries that go with them. And each and every one of those batteries requires about 50 kilograms of graphite. And this is what's going to happen in terms of demand supply as that requirement for graphite for these batteries starts to kick in. Around about the middle of this decade, the red line shows the demand. It starts to grow exponentially. And yet for me, the most, and I don't even know whether that's going to be that kind of curve or not. I don't think there's anyone in the world that really can say hand on heart that they know that the demand will grow in that particular fashion. This is coming from Benchmark Minerals Intelligence, and they are obviously one of the leading battery metals analysts. So we take their word for it. But the reality is, even if it's a little bit flatter, there is still a huge gap between demand and supply. And supply is just not able to grow in the same way as demand. And for those that don't really understand why, it's a multitude of factors. First and foremost, you cannot start a new mine in less than minimum 5 years, more like 10 years. So in terms of reacting to this demand that's starting to kick in over the next couple of years, unless people have already started getting their projects underway, as we did a couple of years ago, and we were lucky enough to pick up something with a mining license, with a lot of work done already, unless companies have really taken a couple of years and already further down this track, they're going to take quite a while to get into production, if they get into production at all, because graphite is a very complicated and complex product in order to sell. And it's one of the reasons why we're going to be putting a pilot plant in place so that we can start that pre-qualification and we can make sure that we're ready to react to this demand curve by the fact that end users have seen our product, they've tested it over a period of time, and they like it. So it's very important to us that we're in the right place at the right time, around about 2025 for full-scale production. That's starting at 25,000 tonnes per annum. Right, in terms of the nickel, this is the new project that we've recently announced. It's exploration. And at the end of the day, when we picked up the graphite project, the graphite, we knew it was there. We knew pretty much how much was there. 2 to 3 billion tonnes is a lot of graphite, so you kind of know you're not going to be short of it. Whereas with the nickel, it's very much about trying to go out there and find it. Now, there's a lot of work that's been done to date. SEPA and Rio Tinto have been in a joint venture for some time. They've spent about $15 million, which is a lot of money. They've identified, they've done a lot of what I call the early stage exploration pathway, identifying anomalies. They did a lot of geochem, found the structures, and then they went in and drilled 19,000 meters. So they've done what I consider to be probably the hardest yards. And just for those who've asked the question, Rio Tinto apparently, and I'm only getting this as hearsay, had a champion who raised this as a project for them and was very much involved in championing the cause. And this is a couple of years ago, of course, when the nickel prices were a little bit lower. That person left Rio and nickel prices weren't that high. And so Rio decided that they just wanted to exit and go and focus on other things. So I don't think it's because they've necessarily walked away feeling that it's not a project that they enjoyed and liked. We always believe that the second party that comes to these exploration projects is the one that tends to win. And I hope certainly in this case, it's going to be Blencowe. The standout is at Aquila Congo. There's effectively an ultramafic unit containing disseminated and massive nickel sulfides. It's about 800 meters in terms of strike length, and it's open pretty much everywhere. There are 3 separate lenses. One is very shallow, presents at surface, and I'll go into the cross sections in a minute. And then there's further deeper at 250 and 300 meters. But here in Australia, people are mining nickel between 1 and 1.5 kilometers. So 250, 300 meters is actually pretty shallow. And as a result of that, and also the higher nickel prices, one can definitely consider much lower cutoff grades. So yes, 0.37 nickel, 0.12 copper is not hugely high grade, and we'd have to get lots of tons to make that work. But at the same time, I'm also very positive that there's some higher grade hits within there and some substantial higher grade hits in there. And so we're going to be obviously targeting finding a lot more of that higher grade nickel going forward as we put our own exploration program in place. That's been planned. Obviously, we're only a day into it now, but we have hit the ground running. I've been having meetings all day on this to basically get this airborne and downhole EM work program working and underway so that we can start to get more news flow coming in. And I think that if we have a lot of drill targets coming through from this EM work going forward, it's going to be very exciting, because if we are able to delineate a sizable new nickel project or deposit, there's not many of these around, particularly nickel sulfides. And so it's going to be massively valuable and definitely worth the effort. Lots of synergies. Obviously, it's very close to Orange Cross. We're definitely going to be managing both in parallel. I want to stress, and I'll probably stress it again before the end of this, that the graphite remains our priority project. We've definitely got a focus on delivering that PFS and getting into production there. The nickel remains something that came past us. We had the opportunity and we're going to give it a go. As you can see from that bottom bullet point, there's only $250,000 required in the first 6 months in terms of the agreement. Most of that will go into this EM work that we're going to be doing. And so there's no huge funding requirement that comes in association with this. We can fund it from the money that we raised in December, and we're quite happy to go forward on that basis. So for those that are considering some of these grades are a little bit light on, you can see from this cross section there's some decent intersections here. This is the shallow lens. So this is between literally surface and about 60 meters. But there's some, above 1% grade nickel and some decent copper in there as well. So I think the opportunity here is to go and find extensions, and as I say, it's open in all directions. So we're going to be putting some EM work in there to go and find us some drill targets going forward. And this is, I guess, the best picture that I've been able to get so far, but I'm hoping to get a better one as we go forward, depicting the three lenses. So the one on the top left is the shallow that you've just seen in the cross section before, and then the red one goes into the medium 250-meter lens, and the sort of purple shaded one is the 300-meter lens. And again, we've got over 1% nickel down there, which is good. So I think we're going to continue to work and find out whether we can find something of some size and scale and substance there. Our plan is to get involved with this identification of targets immediately. So we've got geologists working on a desktop review of all the data at the moment. We're going to piggyback off another company that's doing some airborne EM to keep costs down, and we're going to do some downhole EM work going forward. If that comes up successfully, we'll obviously go out there and we'll drill them, and we'll see where we go from there. But the entire deal structure has been set so that we have 4 separate phases, with obviously the lowest cost at the beginning. And if we don't find anything and it doesn't look like it's got the arms and legs, we can walk away from it, and we've given away very little. But the opportunity that is there for us, if it works out, is going to be incredible. And it's definitely worth taking. So before I finish and we start having some Q&A, I just want to say we've got the opportunity with Orange Cross to become a top 10 global and one of the lowest cost graphite producers, starting from next year. The economics for this will become, well, already apparent in terms of PA, but we're obviously going to show that in a much more depth in terms of PFS that will be coming out in the next couple of months. Uganda is a great location. We've got no issues there whatsoever. The product itself, the quality of the concentrate is incredible. We're getting rave reviews everywhere from it, and that's excellent. And we've got the ability to start smaller, take less risk, less capex, and keep adding to that as the forecast demand starts to develop, and obviously developing in sync with that, so we don't overshoot ourselves like Syra Resources went so big so fast and then they had to pull everything back. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. We want to make sure that we grow with the demand, so that we're always working with our end users to ensure that we've got a market to sell our product into. The EV trend is not going away. I think we probably all realize that. And definitely, I'll say it again, that graphite is a non-replaceable part of that lithium-ion battery in terms of delivering the powering of the electric vehicles. So we're underway with the PFS, and we're going to get that out quite shortly. And yeah, we've just added a very significant and complementary nickel project in there as well, which gives us huge upside potential. So if that's probably where I'm going to finish. I can go back to any of the slides if there are any questions, but Sasha, maybe I'll ask you to fire a few questions at me, and I'm more than happy to take all and any questions going forward.
Sure. Mike, I have about a dozen questions now, and for anyone else who'd like to submit any, the Q&A box on your screen, or you can raise your hand and I'll try and unmute you. Look, Mike, I've got nickel questions first. I've got 4 of these, so if you want to go back to your nickel slides, maybe.
Yeah.
The first question is, do you see the commercial mining of nickel and copper at your newly acquired project feasible regardless of the new highs of commodity prices? So I think probably on whether the well, obviously.
Look, I think the answer to that very briefly is that it's just too early to say. You know, we've got to go and do a lot more work at the grades that we've got, somewhere around about 0.5% nickel with some copper credits as well. I would obviously love to end up having an average grade that's stretching up towards 1%. That'd be fantastic. That would answer the question in itself. But there are plenty of mines mining gold at low grades, nickel at low grades, copper at low grades. It's just a question of, are they shallow? Can you mine cost effectively? And are you able to make profit based on, obviously, the prices for that particular metal at the time? Nickel prices are very high. As I showed you here, we've got a very shallow lens. If we go and find a whole lot more nickel there, it starts to get very interesting, because that's the cheapest nickel for us to mine ultimately. But the honest answer to that question is I don't know yet. We haven't yet done enough, or we haven't yet got enough answers to know whether we're going to be able to mine commercially or not. It's an exploration project. And this is the next phase, is for us to go and find more nickel so that we can do a feasibility study on it.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Next question, also nickel. Although the initial work program at the nickel project is not substantial, to what extent might it cannibalize funds ring-fenced for the development of Orme Cross, the graphite project?
Look, we built in a fair bit of contingency when we raised that £2 million in December last year, for lots of different factors. And one of them was the fact that, this project had been raised to us. We certainly didn't know about it at the time that we're going to actually sign and do it, but we have got contingency factored into what we raised, and it's not going to cannibalize anything in terms of getting that PFS completed. We wouldn't have done it if it did, or we would have raised more money at the time. But it certainly allows us to spend that £250,000 over the 6 months, and then we'll just see where we go, because if we have great success in terms of what we do, then we can obviously make a decision based on that. But absolute priority for us is to get the graphite project ready by the middle of this year to start that pilot plant process for next year.
Okay, thanks, Mike. You may have answered this one already, but having spent $15 million, why did SEPA and Rio Tinto not proceed with the Ali Congo project?
Yeah, I've got you on the name there. It's going to challenge you.
I've never actually had to say it.
I like it, but I've got a lot of East African experience. But SEPA have focused on Western Australia. They're an ASX listed company. They've got some projects up in the north part of this state here, and it really doesn't represent anything that they want to look at from a geographical perspective. And in fact, they're focusing on gold as well, so it's probably a metal perspective also. As I said earlier, Rio Tinto, I'm only telling you what I've heard, and that is that they had a champion that really loved this, somebody that truly believed that there was the structures that could host some large scale deposits. But when that person left, and Rio Tinto just decided to move on. So you can never tell why people have left, to be honest, and sometimes the best projects fall into your lap for the most strange reasons. So we're very comfortable with what we've got. In fact, when we did the due diligence on this, we took it to a couple of what I consider to be standout nickel geologists, because they are very specific in terms of finding the specific pathfinders for nickel, and each and every one of them has been very, very excited by what they've seen. So I don't know. Exploration is exploration. I can't promise anything, but I can say that we're going to give it a first-class effort to try and find something there.
Okay. 2 more questions on the nickel, Mike. One, can the copper being found with the nickel be processed alongside it?
Yes.
Okay. And the last one, sorry, I'm just going to check the chat it was in.
Just to add to that, because maybe it seems a little bit too short an answer for that person that's taken the time to write that question. Typically, when you send your nickel ore off to a smelter to get processed, they are set up to accommodate various different things that come alongside with the nickel, be it copper, some of the PGEs, some of the platinum group elements, and even gold. So I don't know where we'd be sending this to. There's plenty of smelters. There's a huge big one that's going to be going up in northwest Tanzania, which is not far from us. It's too early for us to start looking at that, but definitely you can essentially separate the copper and take it as a credit.
Okay. Does the firm expect to diversify into other battery metals as per Kelly Congo?
No, I don't think so. I think that we're at this stage anyway, we're too small a company to take another project to make it 3. That would just be a step too far. I think, to be honest, we probably wouldn't have taken this one if it hadn't fallen into our lap and the terms of the deal were so good, and the opportunity is so great. And the fact that it's battery metal as well just made it synergistic in terms of both the the product as well as the location. So we're not in a hurry to become, a jack of all trades and doing lots and lots of different things. But nickel is extremely hot at the moment. It's probably one of the hottest metals out there. And if we can find a substantial nickel deposit at Aquila Congo, we could have a company making project here. And we'll know that one way or the other within these first phases. So we're not going to spend an enormous amount of money to get to that decision.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Right, that deals with all the nickel questions I can see out there. Let's move on to Uganda. So 3 or 4 questions here, which have been emailed in.
Yeah, I don't really have a slide. Anyway, yep.
So question here is, some investors will stay away from Blencowe because of Uganda as a country risk, proximity to the South Sudan border, and whether there are any risks for the project there in the short term, and what measures are Blencowe applying to mitigate those risks?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I keep getting asked this by various different people, and I've actually spent quite a lot of time this afternoon talking to our country general manager and getting his opinion on this. Those people who live in Uganda do not see South Sudan as a risk. Yes, they're the odd skirmish and the odd person that comes across and causes a bit of strife, but that happens in every single country anywhere in Africa. South Sudan is very focused on building up its trade, and all of its exports and imports come through Uganda. So there is a lot going on in that area for sure, but we don't see it as being a risky place. Obviously, we're making sure that we carry security wherever we go, just to be sure, because life is very important to us, and particularly of our people who work for the company. But it's not a high risk. And Uganda as a whole is a very calm and very tame place. I've got tremendous respect for President Museveni. I think he's seen by many as having quite a hard fist. But in my opinion, I think that's what's needed in many African countries in terms of making sure that they follow a pathway and deliver. Otherwise, they tend to go off on a tangent and all sorts of things can happen. So everyone will have their own opinion on the politics. But I think that it's a stable country. The currency is stable. The political climate is definitely stable. And we have the opportunity with their support to develop a project going forward. 2 projects.
Thanks, Mike. So look, another one specifically on corruption in Uganda and whether this may have any influence upon permits being granted legally, and whether this is likely to result in greater difficulties in attracting Western capital.
Well, I don't really know what the question is. Are they asking my opinion on whether there's corruption? I mean, I don't really want to answer that, to be honest. I think there's corruption all over the world to various degrees. At the end of the day, we don't see it passing through our particular business. We run a very secure ship. Part of that whole ESG, which I've said we're focusing on so heavily, the G part is governance. We're obviously a London-listed company, and we make sure that we do things and abide by the rules, not just in London, but in country as well. We've got a mining license. We don't need to go out and feather anyone's nest in order to get a mining license. We have it. We can start mining tomorrow. So, we've got to work with the people in the country to deliver the infrastructure. That's probably one of our biggest challenges, in particular the roads and the power. But that's not that difficult. We're lucky enough to have both roads and power coming right into the little village of Orem, which is 3 kilometers away from our project, and therefore we'll be able to connect up quite easily. So we're going to be working, and one of the key parts of this trip that I'm going to be doing in April is to really meet up with all the various different ministries and the various different participants in ensuring that we can make it all happen. And it's in their interests. As I said earlier, the government really wants to see a substantial new mining operation start in Uganda. We're going to be right up there in the headlights, and we're going to make sure that we can deliver, and obviously that's good for both sides.
Thanks, Mike. One last question on Uganda. So looking 12 months ahead, in your opinion, what is the greatest risk in working in Uganda, e.g. political, financial, technical, etc.? And please share how you're going to mitigate it. and the greatest opportunity. Please share how you're planning to maximize the opportunities.
Well, I think the greatest risk is what I call delivery risk. As you can probably hear from my accent, I come from Africa, so I know Africa very well. It's a tough place to get things done because everything tends to work at a slower pace, and you've got to do it in a slightly different way. And that's why it's very important to have a good, strong team on the ground who understand the country and understand how to get things done. But delivery within the time frames and obviously the budgets that we set is, I guess, probably, it's probably the biggest risk of any mining operation regardless, but it's definitely going to be one of the risks that we have to make sure that we don't slip up on. In terms of the opportunity, I think we've announced it yesterday. The graphite has always been there. It's a fantastic opportunity for us, but we knew it was there. And everyone's factored that in to some extent because, we've got enough graphite to mine there for the next 200 years. But the nickel project represents an opportunity. And, for those that may follow the ASX, there's a company out called Chalice Mining that literally had a 100 million market cap 2 years ago. They're now worth $4 billion because they came up and found a brand new nickel sulfide deposit, which I might add is way over 1,000 meters under the ground. And that is the kind of opportunity that we can derive from Aquila Congo if we have success there. And so we're going to give it a red hot crack and we'll just see where we go, because like all exploration programs, you've just got to do them step by step. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but there is a huge opportunity.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike. Look, that covers all the Uganda questions. We're going to move on to Orem Cross and the graphite project here. I've got about 20 questions in total, but some of them are duplicates. Let's try and work through them fairly quickly. Does the appointment of Lone Star Tech Minerals as your sales and marketing agent imply that you are actively pursuing a US-based end user of graphite versus a Chinese one?
We'd prefer to sell into North America or Europe for sure. It's going to be a lot easier to deal with them. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to close off any markets whatsoever. The Chinese are definitely buying the majority of the graphite, so it'd be crazy to cut them off. But Lone Star have exceptional experience in selling graphite to all different markets, including China and North America. So we'll work with them and find out who likes our product, and we'll get samples to them. And we'll work through over a period of time to see if they'll take it.
Okay, so continuing on that, have you made, has there been much progress being made with off-takers and clients?
Not necessarily, because we haven't yet completed our final stage MET test work. That will be done, I'm guessing, within the next month. At that point, we get what I call a fact sheet. I mean, there are all different terms for it, but it's a simple fact sheet that says, here are your 4 products. This is what it's going to take to manufacture them or process them, to get them. And this is what you've got to do in terms of building a plant to make that happen. But at the same time, this is what the properties of those end products looks like. And we'll be able to take those fact sheets out with Lone Star and with other parties that we're working with, and we'll be able to test the market. So I'm suspecting that roughly from the sort of April through to June quarter is when we'll get the most activity working in that sense.
Okay. There's a very similar themed question here, which is, could you expand on the importance of MET studies for graphite?
Well, graphite's very much about what the end product looks like. There are entry levels at 94%, where if you don't get that, you get significantly discounted or they don't take your product. Even once you've got that, then there's all different impurities that you may have, which means you're going to get discounted again. There's different flake sizes, which means you're selling into different markets. It's quite a complicated product. It's not quite as easy as mining gold and you send it down to the local mint. But we're learning fast, and we've got some really good people working with us. And most importantly, we've got a great end product. Everyone's telling us it's as good as they've ever seen. So we're starting from a pretty good spot. And we're just going to have to go out there, as we've said, and test that market and work out, those parties that like it and start working with them over time, and then slowly lead them from samples, hopefully, into our product that we'll deliver from the pilot plant and ultimately from the main plant.
Okay, Mike, continuing on the quality of theme again, you commented just now that the product might be too high in quality of grade for some off-takers. Could you please expand upon this?
Look, it's a bit of a throwaway line from Lone Star saying that because most of the end concentrate comes in that 94 to 96% range, and we're up above 97, they don't have their side lined up to take in the highest of high grades. Now, if that was a problem, we'd just have one less clean, and we'd essentially have a 96% instead of 97, and we'd get a better recovery. So it's actually not a bad problem for us to have. And at the end of the day, we can accommodate it. It's not an issue. It's just, as I say, it's such a high grade that it's quite rare that end users are seeing it, and therefore they're not necessarily set up to take that much of it into their own plants.
Okay, nice problem to have. The company's been releasing a lot of very high grade drill results as of late. What effect is this likely to have on the upcoming JORC upgrade, and when will they be due?
Yeah, and look, for that I have to apologise. I think we're probably a week or two late on that JORC resource upgrade. As I say, it's getting assay results and getting everybody in this world at the moment is challenging, but it's due very shortly. I can't answer what it's going to look like because I don't know at this stage, but I agree with whoever posed that question that we've had some excellent assay results in terms of both of the deposits that we have at Oram Cross. And, I would be expecting a significant increase both in tonnage and in grade from the 16 million tonnes at 6% that we've got already. And, by the way, a lot of that going into the indicated and measured category, which is obviously what we've got to use for the PFS.
Okay, Mike. Couple here on the pilot plant. So first, could you outline why you would like to go immediately to the development of the pilot plant next year rather than going to full-scale production?
Well, we're not ready for full-scale production. Full-scale production would require a full definitive study, which we haven't done. So we're not ready for that. We hope to complete the DFS by the end of next year, and then we'll have a decision to mine for the main plant, and then we'd go out and raise money. End of 2023, so it'll be in 2024, we raise money and build it to start production in 2025. We're not ready for a main plant to go into production next year. What we can do, though, is get a smaller, almost like a mobile pilot plant at about 1,500 tonnes per annum of concentrate. That's what it'll do. It's small, but it does the job. It shows exactly what you're going to mine, what goes through the facility, what goes through the plant, and ultimately what comes out. You have to get all of our infrastructure in place to do that. You have to have communications and a camp, tailings, all the roads, energy, everything that goes into a full-scale mining operation will have to be done for that, but on a smaller scale. And that, as I said earlier, makes it an excellent dress rehearsal because we don't have to commit as much cash. But most importantly, it has two great advantages. The first one of which is we'll be proving to the Ugandan government that we are actually serious and we are starting to mine. And that's a huge factor because they awarded us a mining license. Actually, they awarded it to our predecessors in 2019. And the sooner we can actually show them we're mining, the better. But most importantly of all is this pre-qualification of end sales, which I've spoken about before, so I won't go into detail again, but it's a very, very important part of it. So that when we are producing 25,000 tonnes as our kickoff in 2025, we have end users that are happy to take that in. We're not sitting like many of the other graphite producers you're going to see, where they've got these plants ready and everything's ready to go, but they don't have end users that have pre-qualified and therefore they can't sell their product.
Okay. What level of funding do you expect to get from off-takers if the pilot plant is successful?
Well, we've obviously got to get funding for a pilot plant, and then we would be looking to obviously get funding for the main plant thereafter, as I said, after we've completed the DFS at the end of next year. I can't answer the numbers at this stage because I don't know. That's part of the PFS that's being done at the moment, and the numbers that is for both the pilot plant and the main plant. But it's going to be substantially less than the $80 million that we had originally talked about in the PEA, because we're talking about a plant that's going to be approximately half the size. So we want to start this off smaller pilot plant, and then we're also starting at a smaller 25,000 tonnes, and then we're going to do it in a modular fashion. We're working very closely with Battery Limits, our partner, in order to design the plant so that if the demand for graphite expands as we think it will, we can quite effectively, cost efficiently and efficiently and effectively put another 25,000 tons added to it, and another one and another one. Not each and every year, obviously. It's going to take a little bit of time to bed them all down, but over a 10-year period, we'd expect to ultimately move from 25 up to 100,000 tons.
Okay. Will the pilot plant enable the company to be cash generative?
I think so. We definitely don't want it to be obviously a burden in terms of cash flow. At the very least, it's got to be break even. Again, until I get the PFS and I know what it's going to cost and I know how much the product is going to sell for, I can't really answer that without, pie in the sky stuff, and that's not going to help anybody. But I would expect that it's going to be mildly profitable. Obviously, the unit costs are higher when you're producing a much smaller quantity, so we've got to take that into account. But I would definitely envisage it's going to be at least break even, if not mildly profitable.
Okay. Okay, Mike. So moving on from the pilot plant, have you had discussions with mining operators to buy the project outright? If so, how are they progressing?
No, we're not selling the project, if that's what the question's asking. There's a lot of interest from different parties, be it funds and other interested folks, in terms of being a participant of it, because they can all see the quality of the project as well as where this whole graphite demand is going. But we're certainly not in discussions to sell it to anybody at this stage now.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Does the company have any plans to roadshow within the UK when travel is feasible as COVID subsides? Yes,
absolutely. I'm going to be there in early May. I'm going to be in Uganda in April, and I'm going to be in the UK in May. So be happy to catch up with anybody, and you and I can set that up, Sasha. Be happy to put something together and have this sort of discussion face to face.
Of course. Okay, we're rattling. We have about 5 or 6 of these left now, Mike. 10 minutes to go.
That's okay.
Well, we can go extra, I guess. You state the operating cost per ton to Mombasa Port is $498 per ton. But what is the all-in cost per ton to a Chinese port, if that is a key market?
Yeah, well, we will be selling our product at the port of Mombasa. So the costs, obviously, taking it to China or the United States or or Europe or wherever is for the buyer to pick up. So it's obviously going to be a different cost for each of those locations. I can't sit and tell you what they are. It will add something, obviously, but we are comparing ourselves against other graphite producers who are also selling at their embarkation port. And for us, we want to be seen as one of the lowest cost producers. It obviously gives us more margin, but it gives us more leverage. And I definitely want to be seen as selling a very green product.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Are you starting to work for an environmental license for the pilot plant at Orme Cross for 2023? And is this work already funded? There's another question from the same investor asking what other regulatory approvals will be acquired before first pilot production.
So we have a mining license, and part of that mining license is all our environmental approvals. So we don't need anything else. Now, we are going to go and do a revisit of all of that, because obviously it's been, when they did that in 2019 to get the license, it was 4 years ago, whenever that is now. So we're going to go and revisit parts of that in terms of just making sure that, and a lot of that also has to do with the ESG and sustainability angle that we're going to push very hard. But we don't have to pay for or go and deliver anything from a regulatory perspective. It's done. What we're doing now is really all that we're doing as internal.
Okay, thank you, Mike. On farm-ins, on funding, so Well, there's a couple of questions here. So if you could talk about funding strategies for on-cross to get to full production and whether you'd be willing to consider a farm-in.
Look, we have to consider everything. At the end of the day, we obviously have to take how much money we need, and we have to work out the best possible way to deliver the end result, which will start off by being a pilot plant and ultimately become a main plant. There are different ways to skin that cat. There's equity, there's debt, there's JVs, there's obviously partnerships at a project level. We're going to consider them all, because at the end of the day, the board's job is to consider them all and to make the best decision. I don't know what the best decision is at this stage. What I do know is there's considerable interest from a lot of funds that are focusing heavily on renewables, and they haven't got that many decent projects to, particularly those that are focusing on African projects. They haven't got that many decent projects to be able to invest into. So one of the key aspects of the sustainability angle is for us to appeal to that money, and hopefully that will provide all the cash that we need to take this into production without having to go into any joint ventures. But yeah, look, I'm willing to look at all opportunities.
Thank you, Mike. Look, I've got 2 questions left, and well, I don't want to keep you on too long, Mike. You've been talking for nearly an hour now. But if you do have any final questions, please put them in, and or if you would like to ask a question yourself, then you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. But so to continue, I think more on the green theme. The company has not mentioned hydroelectric power sources before. Is this a new development? Has the company considered applying for the LSE Green Economy mark?
Yeah, it's a good question, that, and I thank whoever sent it, because we haven't really focused enough on that in the past. I agree with that, and we haven't necessarily identified that it's a major advantage for us. They are probably the most important part of getting a green credential is, and obviously the biggest issue in any mining project is your energy and where it comes from. And mines out in the middle of nowhere typically utilize a huge amount of diesel, and we're very lucky that we've got this great big hydroelectric power station that we can utilize energy from. So it puts a huge big tick as a starting point, but it's not the end result. We're doing a lot of work in terms of solar energy. We want to look at electric drying. We're going to be looking at different transport options. We just want to put as carbon and neutral footprint on this as possible, because aside from the fact that it's the right thing to do, but we need to do it in a way that we're obviously not pushing our operating costs up considerably higher. So we've got to find the balance, but it's definitely a means by which we can fund this project and bring it into production going forward. And I think that's probably what's driven us to really focus on this a lot more now. And you're probably seeing it happening everywhere, to be honest. I think a year or two ago nobody even knew what ESG meant, and now it's on everybody's lips. So we want to take it at least a couple of steps beyond the norm, because with the environmental consultants ERN that we're using, we can definitely show ourselves to be a lot friendlier, environmentally friendlier and greener than most other projects.
Okay. Final question is, could you please summarize the upcoming news flow over the next 6 months?
Well, there's plenty. I suppose if I start with the graphite, we've got a JORC resource upgrade coming soon. We've got metallurgical test work which is underway, and that will provide some further news flow as those results come out. We're definitely going to be obviously working through the different phases of the PFS and getting news flow out relative to that. And we'll continue to do, I guess the market would see that we're quite active in terms of putting news flow out there fairly regularly, and we'll continue to do it that way going forward. From the perspective of the nickel, we are in the process of putting our foot over a couple of extra tenements, which look very highly prospective and look very complementary to Aquila Congo. We will be talking, the news flow will be coming through to talk about the plan, the first stage of the EM work and the the work that we're going to be doing in terms of identifying targets. And then as we go through that process and deliver on it, obviously there'll be further news flow going forward. So yeah, there's a lot coming through for both. It's going to be an incredibly busy couple of months. I'm really looking forward to getting out there again. And I'm really hoping we're going to have continue to show the success that we've had so far.
Okay. Look, a final question has just come in. Maybe unless there are others, then it's potentially a good time to stop on this one. And you can summarize if you want, Mike.
Okay.
Is it necessary to get to greater than 16 million tonnes of indicated and measured resource in the revised JORC? What would be a good result?
I think the most important part of this revised JORC for us was to move a whole lot of tonnes from the inferred to indicated. You can't deliver a pre-feasibility study without indicated or measured tonnes. So we had to do infill drilling in order to get further confidence in what we had and where it is, so that you can then do mine planning and obviously get your PFS completed off the back of that. So we went and did that. It was very successful, as you've seen from the assays. We've had some excellent results. Yeah, absolutely necessary to do it. What the end result will be, I don't really know, but as I said, I think earlier, we'll probably end up with over 20 years of mine life because our mining throughput into the plant, because the plant's going to be smaller, our throughput will be lower. So we'll be able to end up with a longer mine life based on what we've got. So it says we don't really need any more drilling. And that's, I think, probably 75% of all the money that we've raised in the company to date has gone on drilling. So without any further drilling to be done, it obviously means that we can run a much tighter ship. So yeah, there's great news flow coming from it soon. Let's just wait and see what they deliver.
Okay. I think that takes us through all the questions now, Mike.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing. That's okay. And if there are any final questions that people want to put their hand up, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But I guess as summary, I just want to thank everybody again for taking the time. I hope it's been informative. You can probably tell there's a fair bit of passion here. I think that we've got something that's quite unique. And we're going to do our level best to make sure that we provide the evidence to the market to show them that. And we'll continue to do what we've done so far. So thank you again. Trying times, challenging times for us all. I don't necessarily think, by the way, that anything happening in Ukraine is going to impact on us. We're just going to keep our heads down and continue to develop our project and do what we do. And yeah, look, I look forward to catching up with anybody that might want to catch up in person when I'm there in the next couple of months. So thank you very much for attending. And Sasha, thank you for hosting.
Mike, one more question. What do you think the market cap should currently be, and therefore the share price? And what are you doing to get this information out there? And just there's another investor who said he sent in 2 questions to the email which weren't asked. I'm sorry, I don't have those, but if you do want to send them in separately, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, that's fine. People can send them. I'm very happy to answer questions, and I think some of the people on this call have probably emailed me in person before and I've answered them, so that's okay. I don't know what the market cap should be. I think that as we transition from explorer developer to producer, we will get a big re-rating. And I think as we start to show the market that we are going to be moving down that pathway from the middle of this year onwards, there's a huge re-rating to come. And not only that, we hope to be putting ourselves right in the firing line for a lot of institutional money, the funds that we haven't necessarily attracted to date. And that will be very interesting because they bring a lot more firepower to buy a lot more on market. So I think that without trying to sort of over sugarcoat it, I believe we are undervalued. Part of that has been because we've had a couple of the early birds that came in who wanted to get out, and it's been a lot of shares hitting the screen. But I think we've actually got to the end of that particular point at this stage. And going forward, I'm confident that as we start appealing to the next tier up, and in particular the institutional funds, we'll start to see that moving. All right. Well, if that's the last question, then I'll wish you all a very pleasant day. And again, thanks very much, and hopefully we'll do this again in the near future.